Hi everyone and welcome back to another Mixed Media Tuesday. Today I'm going for an art journal page and I'm working on a 6x6 watercolor page, by the way. And it's back to basics today. This is a great opportunity if you haven't created a mixed media project in an art journal before. I'm going to go through some basic steps that you can definitely follow. And you can follow the steps with whatever you have at hand. So here I'm just using rice paper that I'm cutting out in little pieces, and I'm just using leftovers from previous projects. For this step you can either use rice paper like I'm doing here, you can cut out little pieces from a magazine, you can use pieces that you cut out from background pattern papers, you can definitely use napkins, tissue paper, collage paper, whatever you have, just cut out little pieces that you can then stick on top of your page. So for the first step on this art journal, we are going to stick the little pieces that we have on top of the page. Now I'm going to embrace a little bit of blank space all around, which is going to work as a border and frame my art later on. So what I'm going to do is to stick down one on top of the other and collage all those little pieces. For sticking everything down, I'm using my rice paper glue. This is a glue specifically designed for sticking down this type of paper, and it dries matte, which is something that I absolutely love. However, keep in mind that you can use any type of glue that you have. Now at this stage I'm just enjoying the process. If you are wondering, I have no clue what I'm going to do later on. So I'm just sticking little pieces of rice paper one on top of the other, just making sure that I don't go all the way to the edges. As I go through the steps today, I'm going to explain my thought process and why I do each step after another. And the idea today is to take you through a very simple art journal page that you can definitely recreate. Even if you don't use the same products like I do, you're going to end up with a lovely project. And this is why today I'm not going to give you a list of supplies down below in the description like I usually do, just to motivate you to use what you have. And if you actually get inspired by the thought process today and you create something that you post on social media, make sure to tag me. I would love to see what you have created. Now when I edit my art journal process videos, I usually fast forward some parts, so this would be a part that I would have fast forwarded for sure, but I thought that today's video is like a crash course on art journal or art journaling for beginners, so why not just leave it as it is so you can see exactly what I'm doing and how much time it takes me to do it. Also keep in mind that as I apply my matte glue, you see that it comes a little bit milky. However, when it dries completely clear. So all the colors of the tissue paper, of the rice paper, are going to show just fine. And another thing that I need to mention at this stage is that I haven't prepped the page at all. I'm just working directly on top of the watercolor paper. Now I'm happy at this stage with the background. I'm going to make sure that this is completely dry and then we can move on to step number 2. Now if you want to do a little bit of stamping, now is the time. I'm going to use a couple of stamps, small ones, to add some markings here and there, and for that it is really important to use permanent ink. So no matter what you do later on top of your page, it's not going to smudge or smear. For the stamping, we are not going for the perfect impression, so you can either use a small stamping block if you like, but don't go ahead and try to get the perfect impression by stamping the whole thing or inking up the whole thing. You see here I'm just even doing second generation stamping, like one on top of the other. And you can definitely use just your fingers instead of a stamping block, which is a technique that I'm going to do in a bit. So first I'm just adding a little bit of text, and notice that I'm mainly staying around the perimeter, the border. So I'm stamping a little bit outside of the rice paper, and now with my fingers and that other stamp, I'm going to add some markings as well. Again, same black permanent ink and mainly staying on the borders. Somehow connecting with that stamping the rice paper with the white border that I have all around. For the third step, we are going to add a little bit of white. You can do that either with gesso or white acrylic paint like I'm doing here, and you can either apply a white wash, like dilute the acrylic paint with water and apply it over your background with a brush. This is going to make sure that it knocks the colors back a little bit and it makes this look like a background, like an actual background. Or if you want, you can use the technique that I'm doing here. Just with a spatula, you can apply a little bit of white acrylic paint here and there. You can use this technique to cover up some very vibrant colors maybe, or perhaps some designs that you don't like and you feel like they are very prominent. You can always use a baby wipe to wipe off some extra paint that you applied. Just play along on your page and decide how it's going to look and what looks best for you. You can see that some areas now are completely covered with white, while others are semi-transparent. Use your heat gun or wait for this step to dry, and then let's move on to step number 4. For this step, we are going to play with stencils. Just grab any stencil that you have. It can be letters, numbers like I'm using here, or it can be a pattern. Just decide what matches what you have already on your page, and then grab a paste. Here I'm using Glamour paste. This is a completely brand new jar, so you see it is very smooth and easy to apply. As it dries, it is going to be thicker and thicker. So I need to make sure that I don't apply too much with my spatula, otherwise it's going to seep underneath my stencil. I don't want to overwhelm my page with that paste since it is black. So I'm just going to add it only in a couple of areas. You can definitely use any paste that you have, either white or any other color, just you decide. It can be gold, whatever. You decide what matches the colors of your page and what you have already there. Now this is a little bit shiny when it dries and it gives a lovely texture. And of course you need to leave that step to dry before you move on to the next step. Now you see here, since I do have that extra paste on the cup, I just dilute it with a little bit of water, and I'm going to add some random splatters on top of my page. And then I had to run some errands, so I went to the grocery store and do things for the house, and when I was back, the page was completely dry. Of course, don't forget to wash your stencil. So I was super happy with the background, and now let's put a page together by adding a focal point. Depending on the colors that you already have on your background, you need to find and fuzzy cut a focal point that is going to stand out against the background. So here I am going with a couple of mushrooms just because they have that bright red and they are going to stand out, as you can see. So I'm just going to fuzzy cut those, and you can use any focal point that you like. If you can't think of anything, I'm sure you all can find a butterfly. It's going to be very vibrant, very colorful, so it's going to look lovely on any background pretty much. Especially if you did that white wash step that we did previously. Other fun focal points that you can use are of course flowers or leaves. Again, very colorful, and they are going to stand out usually on any background. As my source of focal points, I like to use cutout images for pattern papers, and sometimes I stamp images and color them to use them as my focal points. But you can definitely use ephemeras, magazine cutouts, can use printout images from your computer. Just be creative. For the page today, I'm going to keep things very simple, so as long as I have those couple of mushrooms, I'm happy with the focal points, and these are going to be the ones that I'm going with. If you have one of those paper dolls, you can have one setting on top of the mushroom, which is going to give your page more life, let's say, or if you have a butterfly or something that is alive, always makes the page look more interesting and gives it some movement. But again, I'm going for a very simple page today. Again, for this process, you can use your glue stick, you can use any glue that you have. I'm using again the rice paper glue that I used for the first step, but you see it works on paper as well, so you don't have to get a new one. I am covering up the mushrooms as well as sticking them down. This is going to cover them up and seal them down. At the same time, it's going to make them non-porous. I do that because I'm going to use my big brush markers to add highlights and shadows later on. Notice that everything looks very milky. Don't worry about it. It's going to dry completely matte and clear. I always like to add a motivational quote on my journals. For this project today, I'm going to use a couple of phrases from my Secret Diary collection. And I designed this page specifically for this type of projects. There is a big variety of quotes here that pretty much cover many subjects. For this specific page, I decided to go with Grow Wild and Free, since we do have those wild mushrooms. And I'm also using Nature Never Goes Out of Style. So I'm going to combine a couple of phrases. Now for this step, you can definitely write down whatever you like with a marker. You can print out something and stick it down. Sometimes I even use my label maker. You can put together a quote by using a stamp, or even cut out letters that you use dies to cut them out. So here again I place those cutouts on top of my page. I'm auditioning here, trying to decide what looks nice, balanced. And once I decide on the placement and I feel that it is pleasing to the eye, I'm just going to bring in again my rice paper glue and stick them down. Again, as you notice, I cover up the quote, not only adding the glue underneath, but also on top. Again, a step completely optional, but I always like to do that, just in case I decide on a technique later on. Remember that I work layer by layer, so I'm not always sure of what the next step is going to be. Again, I'm going to bring in my heat gun and make sure that the glue is completely dry before I move on to the next step. And now for my favorite step of all, the one where I do the shading, the highlighting and some doodling. So now this is again completely optional, but I grab my markers, and these are my big brush markers by Faber-Castell, that I apply a little bit of color on one side, and then with my finger I smudge it so that I can avoid any harsh lines on the highlighting and the shading. You will see that it helps the images come to life as I bring those vibrant colors, and when I add a darker color to add the shadow, it's going to help those images pop even more from the background. Now this is a technique that requires you to try it out a few times before you perfect it. These are Indian ink markers. They don't cover up whatever is underneath. They are semi-transparent. So keep in mind, this technique doesn't work with acrylic markers, that they are opaque. And it doesn't work with alcohol markers because you are not able to smudge them. They dry instantly the moment you touch the tip on your page. Now, if you are a beginner, you probably don't have these markers in your stash, but you don't really need to have them. You can get a similar result just by using your pencils. Just simple colored pencils can add some highlights and some shadows on different areas of your focal points. Or you can use your watercolors, definitely an option. As I'm sharing the process and the steps that work for me, keep in mind that you can omit some of the steps. You can add extra steps if you like, definitely. There is no art journal police, as I always say, and there is no right or wrong in art journaling. The idea of art journaling is to play with what you have, enjoy the process, have fun, be creative, and it's very therapeutic to see the finished project. Now I'm going to use a fine black marker and I'm going to draw some sketchy lines around some of the cutouts. I'm not going to do it all around. I'm not creating the perfect line. Notice, very sketchy, to match the style and the organic look of the background. I'm also going to grab a white jelly roll and I'm going to add some highlights completely randomly again here and there. Oh, and I also made sure that I added some of the dots on the mushrooms because some of them were covered up when I did the shading and the highlighting with my markers. So I'm also going to draw some lines around my quote. This is going to help the phrases pop against the background again. And I'm doing that with the black marker, but I'm also going to add some white sketchy lines around them as well. Final step, and I'm going to add some random white splatters just because I love them. Again, completely optional, only if you like this look. I'm using a very fine brush to make sure that I somehow control where those splatters fall. So this is pretty much the whole page. I hope that you had fun, that you got inspired. I'm going to add some close-up photos where you can see the details better. And again, today I'm not sharing a list of supplies. Use what you have at home. Let me know in the comments what you think about this process. I hope that you had fun, that you got inspired, and I'll see you all next time.